Welcome to this week's podcast. In this episode, we will be talking about Italy celebrating their win at the European Championship, protests against the communist government in Cuba, and some good news about COVID vaccination in the EU. Let's get started. Italians celebrated the European Championship title as their first major football trophy since the 2006 World Cup, after Italy beat England in a penalty shootout on Sunday night. Thousands of people took to the streets in Rome after the win, celebrating along with honking cars and fireworks. Although most COVID restrictions have been lifted by now, the ones that remain in place were ignored by most people in the midst of celebration, dancing on the streets of cities. In theory, people are still required to wear a mask in a crowd, but the police in Rome did not intervene this time as fans were pouring out onto the streets, singing and chanting. As the winning team arrived back in Italy Monday morning, they were greeted with similar joy. Many celebrating Italians said the European Championship means a new beginning for the country, especially after being hit hard by COVID and spending much of the past 16 months in various stages of lockdown. Meanwhile, English fans were left heartbroken as England remains without a major trophy since 1966, when they beat West Germany in the World Cup final. In Cuba, the biggest mass demonstrations in 3 decades took part as thousands took to the streets of Havana and other major cities, demonstrating against food shortages and the country's communist government. Cuba is experiencing its biggest economic crisis in 30 years after the Trump administration hammered the island with more than 200 new sanctions. These measures are still in place and the country's economy has been suffering even more since the start of the pandemic, which has gutted the revenue from tourism as well. Last year, Cuba's economy shrank by 11%, which is its worst decline in almost 3 decades. Cubans often have to wait in line for hours for food and other basic goods, and there is also a shortage of medicine in the country. These conditions have now sparked outrage in the population, resulting in Sunday's protests. The protesters were also demanding a faster COVID vaccination program after Cuba reported a record of nearly 7,000 daily infections and 47 deaths on Sunday. In the afternoon, thousands of pro-government protesters also showed up after a televised speech from President Miguel Díaz-Canel. The Cuban president urged people to defend the current system. He called the anti-government protests a provocation by mercenaries hired by the US in order to destabilize the country. Security forces were allegedly detaining and beating some participants during the protests. The European Union has received enough doses to fully vaccinate 70% of its adult population, according to the announcement of EU Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen. In her statement on Saturday, she said by this Sunday, 500 COVID vaccine doses will have been distributed among the 27 EU member states, which means they will be able to vaccinate at least 70% of EU adults fully still this month. Our joint approach is a success. We will come out of this crisis together, said von der Leyen. Now member states must do everything to increase vaccinations. Only then will we be safe, she added. However, the statement warned that coronavirus is still not defeated, adding that the EU stands ready to keep delivering more vaccines, including jabs against new variants. So far, 63.8% of the EU's adult population has received at least one dose, and 44.1% has received a full vaccination course, according to the vaccine tracker of the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control. Thank you for listening. Join us again next week.